All right, let me tell you something, man. Football is about to go through one of the craziest shifts we've ever seen, and people don't even realize how big this is going to be because when you talk about a World Cup with four, you're not just talking about adding more matches or squeezing in a few extra nations. You're talking about rewriting the DNA of the sport. You're talking about shaking up the entire system, and the ripple effects of this thing are going to hit everywhere, from the kid kicking a ball in some dusty street dreaming of making it, to the biggest clubs in the world scouting fresh blood, to the fans who are about to witness stories and upsets we've never seen before. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating because it's not just a numbers change, it's a paradigm shift. It's football saying we're opening the doors wider than ever, and that means more chaos, more opportunity, more voices being heard. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss the start of something that could completely redefine how we look at the game. So strap in, because once we dive into this, you'll see why this isn't just a tournament change. This is the beginning of a whole new era. Man, this whole expansion to it's wild when you think about it because for years the World Cup had this exclusive vibe, like only the best of the best get in, and it was almost like a secret club of football elites. But now with 48 teams, it's like they're opening the doors to way more countries, and you start realizing what that actually means because you're not just giving more games, you're literally giving millions of kids from smaller nations the chance to dream a little bigger. And that's powerful, man, because imagine being a kid from a country that's never made it, and suddenly you see your flag on the world stage, you see your players standing toe to toe with Brazil or Germany, and it changes everything about how you see football and what's possible for you. But at the same time, people are torn about it, right? Because some argue the quality could dip. Like, do we really want to watch mismatches where one side gets smashed 7-0? But then again, isn't that part of the charm of sports, the unpredictability, the underdog story, like Iceland knocking out England in the Euros or Saudi Arabia beating Argentina? Nobody saw that coming. And that's what made it beautiful. And when you bring more nations in, you're just increasing the odds of something like that happening again. Plus, it's not just about the tournament itself, it's about the ripple effect, because more representation means more investment back home. Governments and federations start putting more money into facilities, into youth academies, into training programs, and that builds future stars. So while, yeah, some groups might feel uneven, what you're really doing is planting seeds all over the world, and maybe 10 or 20 years down the line, that country that used to be a pushover suddenly has a golden generation that shocks the world, and that never happens if they never get the chance. So expansion, it's more than just football math or scheduling. It's literally shifting the culture of the game, making it less of a European, South American monopoly and more of a truly global celebration. And sure, it'll be messy at times, but sometimes messy is exactly what makes football great. When you really break it down, the biggest thing about this whole 48 team format is the opportunities it creates for young players. Because think about it, every extra slot in that tournament means another squad, another roster spot, another teenager or early 20-something kid who suddenly gets thrown onto the biggest stage in the world. And you can't even imagine what that does for someone's career. Like, you go from being this unknown kid grinding in some local league or maybe just starting out in Europe to suddenly standing across from Neymar or Mbappe playing in front of billions. And that moment alone can change the trajectory of your entire life, because it's not just about playing, it's about exposure. Scouts from the biggest clubs on the planet are watching, agents are watching. And if you have one insane game, just one highlight reel goal or a breakout performance, your whole career blows up and you're on the radar forever. And this is the kind of stuff that we take for granted, because right now with the limited spot, so many kids from smaller footballing nations never get to show what they can do on that stage. It's like their ceiling is capped, but now with more teams, the ceiling gets blown wide open. And what's crazy is how it motivates them to, because imagine you're 15 years old in some country that never qualified before. Suddenly you're thinking, holy shit, I might actually play in a World Cup one day. It's not just a fantasy anymore. And that changes the way you train, the way you approach your craft. It makes you hungry. And when that hunger spreads across entire squads of kids, you end up raising the level of the game everywhere. And the ripple effect is insane, because even the ones who don't become stars still bring that experience back home. They teach, they coach, they inspire, and before you know, that one chance in a World Cup ends up fueling a whole new generation of talent. So when people complain that adding more teams waters things down, I always think, nah, man, it just opens the door for more Cinderella stories, more breakout stars, more kids who might have stayed invisible otherwise. And isn't that what football's about? Giving the world's most gifted but hidden players a shot to show the world who they are. Because you never know when the next GOAT is sitting somewhere waiting for that one chance to explode. The thing about global representation is that it completely changes the way the World Cup feels, because for the longest time it was kind of dominated by the same regions. Europe and South America are running the show, and sure, they've got history, they've got powerhouses, but football isn't just a European or South American. It's a global game, and when you open it up to 48 teams, suddenly you've got countries that people barely associate with football stepping onto the same stage as Brazil, Argentina, Germany, and France, and that's huge, not just for the players but for the fans back home who never thought they'd see their nation in a World Cup. Imagine the pride, man, seeing your flag on the world's biggest stage, singing your anthem while the cameras roll. It gives people chills. It unites whole nation, and it tells every kid with a ball in those countries that, yeah, this dream isn't just for a chosen few, it's for you too. And what's crazy is how it transforms the cultural vibe of the whole tournament, because instead of being dominated by the same fan base, you've got new cultures bringing their chants, their energy, their colors, and it's like the ultimate global festival, a literal United Nations of football. And sure, some critics will say, oh, the quality might dip, we'll see lopsided games. But honestly, that's such a short-sighted view, because the quality only rises when you give more people a chance to compete. You plant seeds in places that never had them before, and in time those seeds grow into something special. Plus the unpredictability goes through the roof, because with more teams from different backgrounds, you never know who's going to show up and shock the world. Like, look at what Saudi Arabia did to Argentina in 2020, moments that stick with you forever. And the more countries you let in, the more of those stories you get. And it's also about fairness, man, because why should the same 30 nations get all the spotlight while others sit on the sidelines just because they were born into the wrong federation? Football belongs to the world, and when you make the World Cup actually look like the world, you get something more authentic, more beautiful, and more in line with what this sport is supposed to be, which is unity through the game. The whole competition quality debate with this 48-team format is one of those things that really divides people, because on one side you've got the purists saying the World Cup is supposed to be the absolute peak of football, the sharpest, most elite competition where only the strongest survive. And by letting in more teams, you're watering it down. You're going to get these lopsided matches where giants are smashing minnows 6-0, and I argue that it takes away from the prestige. Like, it's not the same badge of honor if just anybody can qualify. But then on the other side, you've got this whole other camp that sees it differently. They're like, dude, what's wrong with a little chaos? What's wrong with underdogs getting a chance? Because think about some of the greatest World Cup stories we've ever had. They weren't the obvious one. They were the shocks, the upsets, the little nations standing up to giants and saying, not today. And that's exactly what an expanded format encourages. And yeah, maybe the quality in terms of pure technical execution dips in a few games, but football's never just been about perfection. It's about drama, it's about heart, it's about the unexpected. And this debate really exposes how people see the sport, because some people want it to stay this polished elite showcase, while others love it for the raw human element, the unpredictabilities. And honestly, the game evolves when you give more people a seat at the table, because those weak teams won't stay weak forever. You give them the spotlight, the experience, the resources that come from qualifying, and 10-20 years later they're suddenly contenders. So it's like a long-term investment into the future of football. But the traditionalists don't see it that way. They see the short term. They see a mismatch in the group stage and go, see, I told you, it ruins the tournament. But they're missing the bigger picture. And what's funny, when one of those supposed weak teams pulls off an upset, everyone loses their minds, everyone shares the clips, everyone calls it one of the best moments ever, and you can't have that magic without taking the risk of some blowout. So really, the competition quality debate isn't just about football, it's about philosophy. It's about what you value in sport. Do you want a polished, exclusive showpiece, or do you want a wild, unpredictable global celebration where literally anything can happen? That's where the real tension lies. The long-term impact of this whole 48-team expansion is honestly where it gets really interesting, because it's not just about one tournament or one cycle. It's about how this move reshapes football for decades. You gotta think about it like dropping a rock in a pond. The ripples keep going, because when more countries qualify, it forces federations to invest in their youth.
their infrastructure, their grassroots systems. Since suddenly the World Cup doesn't feel like some impossible dream, it becomes a reachable goal. And when that switch flips in a nation's mindset, it's a game changer. Like governments start funding programs, clubs start scouting deeper, coaches put more emphasis on development, and kids who maybe would have chosen basketball or cricket or just never thought football was for them suddenly see a path, and in 20 years that kid could be the next superstar. So you've got this long arc of talent development that wouldn't have existed without the expanded format. And then there's the global balance of power to consider, because right now it's still the same names dominating, but the more exposure you give to Africa, Asia, North America, and smaller European nations, the more the traditional giants get challenged, and that creates a healthier, more competitive ecosystem, which in the long run makes the game more exciting. But you also can't ignore the economic and cultural ripple effects, because qualifying for a World Cup isn't just football, it's money, sponsorships, tourism, and national pride. It boosts economy, inspires future generations, and keeps entire cultures glued to the sport in a way they might not have been before. And that kind of momentum doesn't fade, it compounds, it snowballs, and suddenly you're watching a country that never mattered in football 10 years ago become a legit threat. And on the flip side, the Giants have to adapt too, because now they're not just steamrolling the same teams, they're facing fresh, hungry nations who have nothing to lose, and that pressure forces the big federations to keep evolving, to not get complacent, and that in itself raises the overall standard. So the long-term impact is this insane mix of more opportunities, more unpredictability, and more global growth. And yeah, maybe in the short term you get some uneven match, but 20 years down the line you're going to see a completely different football landscape, with more stars coming from places we don't even think about right now. And that's what makes this expansion so powerful. It's not just a numbers game, it's the start of a whole new era. So when you really sit back and look at this whole thing, man, the expansion, the opportunities, the global representation, the debates about quality, the long-term ripple effects, it all comes down to one truth: football is evolving, and whether people like it or not, the future's gonna look different. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually what makes it so exciting, because it means the next World Cup isn't just going to be the same old story told by the same old countries. It's going to be this brand new chapter where more voices, more culture, more players get their shot. And sure, there are risks. Sure, there are growing pains. But that's how progress works. You step into the unknown, you take the gamble, and you trust that the beauty of the game is big enough to carry it forward. And honestly, if you love if you love the drama, the unpredictability, the way it unites people across the planet, then you've got to embrace this. Because the best moments in this sport never came from things staying the same. They came from those shocking, crazy, unforgettable moments that nobody saw coming. And now we're setting up a future with even more of those. So yeah, buckle up, because we're all about to watch the game transform right in front of us. And that's something we'll look back on years from now and say we lived through the start of a new era. So good luck to all the young players chasing this dream. Good luck to the nation stepping into the spotlight for the first time. And thank you guys for hanging with me, for listening, for being part of this conversation, because at the end of the day, it's not just football, it's life, it's stories, it's the human experience, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.